It was 11:51 p.m. I was 19 years old and I was working. My screen glowed in the dark of my tiny loft apartment lines of code for a freelance UX project blurring together. I was trying to get ahead, trying to build something. Then my phone lit up the desk. A text from my mother, Michelle. It wasn't long, just a few words that landed like ice. Clara, after what happened with Ryan, your father and I have agreed. You are no longer part of this family. I read it once, twice. The air in my lungs felt still. I wasn't breathing. And then a second later, a small red icon popped up under the message. A heart. My sister Victoria had loved the text. The cruelty of it was so precise, so efficient, not a wasted motion. It wasn't hot anger, it was surgical. And in that moment, staring at the screen, I didn't feel the familiar sting of sadness. I didn't feel the urge to cry. I just felt clarity. Like a lens I hadn't known was blurry, had suddenly snapped into perfect, sharp focus. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community. I didn't text back. I didn't call and demand an explanation. I didn't cry. My hands, which had been shaking slightly from the late-night caffeine, were now perfectly steady. I closed my design file. I opened my banking app. Then I opened a spreadsheet I'd kept hidden in a secure folder for over a year. The file was titled Unseen Work, Family. It was a meticulous record of every dollar, every hour, every piece of myself I had poured into that family since I'd moved out and started earning real money as a designer. It was my private ledger, my proof. My mother's text was a termination of contract, so I decided to do the accounting. The time on my laptop read 12:03 a.m. 12 minutes was all it took. First, I logged into the joint account I'd set up for household emergencies. That's what my dad, Scott, had called it. I looked at the automatic payment scheduled for the next morning. Mortgage payment $1,200. I had paid it for the last 12 months ever since my dad's business venture failed and the bank was threatening foreclosure. I clicked cancel payment. Next, I went to the credit card I'd given my sister Victoria for her wedding expenses. She'd promised it was just for the deposit on the flowers, but the balance was already $15,000. The payment for the caterer was due next week. I clicked freeze card, then report card lost, and cancel all pending transactions. Finally, I pulled up the invoice from the high-end wellness center my brother Ryan had been in for the last month. It wasn't wellness, it was rehab. And the text message from my mother suddenly made sense. After what happened with Ryan, he must have relapsed or gotten kicked out, and like always, they needed someone to blame. The payment for his next month was $20,000. I had paid the first installment. I would not be paying the second. I closed the spreadsheet. You see, I hadn't been a daughter. I'd been a silent investor, a crisis manager, the one who funded the illusion that our family was perfect. I was the one who paid for my sister's perfect wedding, my brother's rehabilitation, and my parents' roof, all while they told their friends I was still finding my way with my little computer hobby. They hadn't just kicked out their daughter. They had just fired their benefactor. This wasn't a family drama. This was a balance sheet. And for the first time in my life, the numbers were finally adding up. You have to understand my reaction wasn't anger. It was an awakening. For my entire life, I had been the responsible one, the easy one. The girl who never asked for anything because she was too busy cleaning up everyone else's messes. I was never really a daughter. I was a function. I was the load-bearing wall in a house that was structurally unsound. I actually read about this in a psychology class. It's called family systems theory. It explains how in dysfunctional families, everyone gets locked into a specific role. My sister Victoria was the golden child. She was the one who got the applause, the perfect grades, the endless praise. She was the family's showroom model. Her entire job was to look good and make my parents proud. My brother Ryan was the problem child, the scapegoat. He was the one who was always in trouble, always needed saving, always created the next five-alarm fire. He sucked up all the family's emotional energy and resources. He was their full-time project. And then there was me, Clara. I was the fixer. My role was invisible, but it was the most important one. My job was to make all the other roles possible. I was the one who mediated the fights, who found the lost keys, who drove Ryan to his appointments, who stayed quiet when Victoria needed the spotlight, and eventually who paid the bills. I was the unseen work that kept the whole performance running. The terrible, cruel irony is that my competence was the source of my invisibility. I was so good at being the fixer that they stopped seeing me as a person. I only became visible when they needed something fixed. A mortgage, a rehab bill, a wedding deposit. I wasn't a child to be loved. I was a utility to be used. That text message at 11:51 p.m. wasn't just an insult. It was a severance package. They were telling me my function was no longer required, or so they thought. What they failed to understand was that the fixer was also the one holding the checkbook. My competence wasn't a weakness. It was my weapon. And I was just beginning to understand how to use it. I slept for maybe 2 hours. When I woke up, the sun was just starting to tint the edge of the city and my phone looked like a bomb had gone off. 22 missed calls. A dozen texts. They weren't apologies. They were demands. The first text was from my sister Victoria. Mom is hysterical. The caterer just called her saying the deposit bounced. What did you do? You're being cruel and overreacting. Cruel. Overreacting. I just stared at that word. Cruel. I had spent the last 5 years paying for their stability. I had given up my own college savings so Ryan could go to that first rehab center. I had worked 20-hour days on freelance projects just to cover the mortgage payment my father Scott forgot about. For a second, I felt that old familiar ache rise up in my chest. It's the guilt of the giver. It's that sick, twisting feeling you get when you've been trained your entire life to put everyone else first. It's the voice in your head that whispers you're a monster for finally saying no. It's the panic that rises when you set a boundary and the person on the other side reacts with anger instead of understanding. They program you to feel guilty so you'll keep giving. I looked at Victoria's text. Then I looked at the missed calls. My mother, Michelle, my father, Scott, my sister, Victoria. Not a single call from Ryan, of course. I took a deep breath and let the guilt drain away, replaced by that cold, hard clarity from the night before. This wasn't cruelty. This was a consequence. Then my phone buzzed again. A new voicemail from my mother. I listened. It wasn't crying. It was screaming. Clara, I don't know what game you're playing, but you have created a mess. The bank called the wedding is in jeopardy. You fix this. You fix this right now. She didn't say what's wrong. She didn't say why would you do this. She didn't even mention the text from 11:51 p.m. She just demanded that I fix what I had broken, completely oblivious to the fact that they were the ones who had shattered everything. No apology, no remorse, just entitlement. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was who they were. I blocked their numbers. All of them. Then I went to the 24-hour artisan bakery, where I sometimes worked evening shifts. The owner, Brenda, was a woman in her late 50s with flour in her hair and steel in her spine. She'd been a corporate lawyer for 20 years before cashing out to make sourdough. She was my mentor, and she didn't tolerate nonsense. I found her kneading dough and I told her everything. The text, the spreadsheet, the canceled payments. I finished and said, I don't even know if I want the money back, Brenda. I want them to stop. I want it to be over. Brenda didn't even look up from the dough. She just folded it hard. Clara, she said, her voice quiet and even, this isn't a family dispute. This is financial abuse. You were not their daughter. You were their unauthorized line of credit, and we are going to treat it as such. She washed her hands, dried them on her apron, and picked up her phone. You're not asking for anything, she said. You are informing them of the accounting. I'm sending a formal notice to their email. It will outline every payment you made, every date, and a total. It will give them 30 days to propose a repayment plan before we file a civil suit. I hesitated. A civil suit. She looked at me, her eyes sharp. They didn't hesitate when they excommunicated you over a text message. You will not hesitate to send them the bill. She drafted the email. It was calm, factual, and absolutely lethal. She hit send. For 2 days there was silence. The panic from their side had stopped. I almost let myself believe it was over. I went to my design class. I worked my freelance gigs. I tried to breathe. Then on Wednesday afternoon, Brenda called me. Her voice was different. The sharp anger was gone, replaced by something cold. Clara, she said, I was preparing the file just in case. I did a deep dive on your financials. Do you remember an inheritance your great-aunt left you, specifically for your education? My blood went cold. Yes, I said. $50,000. My dad said he put it in a high-yield trust for me until I turned 25. I heard Brenda take a slow, steadying breath. Clara, that money is gone. It was withdrawn 3 months ago. I couldn't speak. I'm looking at the withdrawal form from the bank. Brenda continued, her voice flat. It required your signature. Clara, that is not your signature. I sat down on the floor of my apartment. The light from the window felt gray. She forged it, I whispered. Yes, Brenda said. Michelle forged your signature and emptied your trust fund. I pulled the bank statements from the same week. The entire $50,000 was transferred directly to pay off a gambling debt belonging to your brother Ryan. She had stolen from me. 3 months before they kicked me out, she had stolen my future, my one safety net, to once again fix Ryan's mess. This wasn't neglect. This wasn't entitlement. This was a crime. The 11:51 text message wasn't just them kicking me out. It was them trying to sever the connection before I found out what they had already done. I hung up the phone. The fight wasn't about Victoria's wedding or my father's mortgage anymore. This wasn't about being unloved or unseen. This was about forgery. This was about theft. And I realized my mother hadn't just made a mistake. She was a criminal. And I was done protecting her. It took about a week for the next phase. A week where I lived in the eye of the storm. The silence from their end was deafening. But this time it didn't feel hollow. It felt strategic. I tried to live normally. I went to my design classes. I sat in my tiny apartment with my roommate Leo, who was smart enough not to ask why. I'd suddenly gone quiet. I had dinner with Evan, the guy I'd been seeing. He had cut off his own family for being too controlling, too invasive. We were an odd pair. He was running from a family that wanted to know everything, and I was running from one that never wanted to know anything. But he understood boundaries. He didn't push. Then came the banging on my door. It wasn't a knock. It was a frantic, desperate pounding that rattled the thin wood of my apartment door. I looked through the peephole. It was my mother, Michelle. I hadn't seen her in person in almost 6 months. She looked wrecked. Her hair was a mess, her eyes were red and swollen, and she was wearing a stained tracksuit. This was not the put-together woman who hosted perfect dinner parties. This was the woman behind the curtain. I opened the door. She burst in, or tried to. "Clara, thank God you have to stop this." She was crying, real heaving sobs. "They're talking about fraud. They're talking about prison. Clara, prison." She grabbed for my arm, and I stepped back. "Please," she begged, her voice cracking. "We'll lose everything. The house. Everything we've built. You can't let this happen. Do something. Think about your sister. Her wedding is ruined." I just looked at her. The woman who had sent me that text. The woman who had loved it. The woman who had screamed at me to fix it. And now the woman who was begging me to save her from a crime she had committed. I thought about the guilt I used to feel. I thought about the years I spent shrinking myself so they could feel big. I thought about my $50,000, my inheritance gone. "Do something for your sister," she sobbed again. "Do something for your family." My voice when it came out was low and steady. It didn't shake. I didn't recognize it. I already did. I walked to my desk, picked up a single folded document, and walked back. I handed it to her. She looked at it confused. "What? What is this?" "That's the civil complaint," I said. "It details the forged signature and the $50,000 you stole from my trust fund. It also details every dollar I've spent on this family that I am now collecting." Her face went white. The tears stopped instantly. "The bank has already frozen all your accounts pending the fraud investigation," I said. "The house has a lien against it. Victoria's caterer isn't the problem anymore, Michelle." She looked up from the paper, her eyes narrowing. The victim was gone, replaced by the woman I recognized. "You," she whispered. "You wouldn't." I just stared at her. "Goodbye, Michelle," I said, and I gently closed the door in her face. I heard her scream on the other side. It wasn't a scream of sadness. It was a scream of pure, unfiltered rage. The sound of a person who had just lost all control. I leaned my back against the door, and for the first time in my entire life, I didn't feel the urge to go and fix it. The case was settled out of court. It was fast, brutal, and clinical. My mother, Michelle, and my father, Scott, had no defense against the forgery charge. The evidence was absolute. To avoid criminal prosecution, they signed everything over. The house was sold in less than a month. The money from the sale was used to pay back the $50,000 my mother had stolen from my trust fund, and then the rest of what was documented in my spreadsheet. The wedding for my sister Victoria was indefinitely postponed. I heard she didn't take it well. I heard my brother Ryan was forced into a state-run program. One morning, my phone buzzed with a bank notification. A wire transfer. It was all there. Every dollar I had given and every dollar they had taken. I sat at my desk in my small apartment, the morning light cutting across the floor. I opened my laptop. I found the file Unseen Work, Family. I opened it one last time. I stared at the rows and columns, the dates, the amounts, the categories: mortgage Victoria, wedding Ryan, rehab. It was a perfect record of my own erasure, a testament to how much I was willing to give just to be seen and how much they were willing to take. I clicked on the file, I moved my cursor, and I hit delete. It didn't feel like forgiveness, it didn't feel like anger, it felt like accounting. It was simply finished. The debt was paid, the ledger was clear. That night, my roommate Leo made pasta, just cheap noodles with sauce from a jar. Evan, my boyfriend, came over after his class, bringing a bottle of $2 wine. We sat on the floor of our tiny living room plates in our laps. And it hit me. I was looking at my found family. We always talk about family as this thing we're given, this heavy, unchangeable weight of blood and obligation. But we never talk enough about the families we build. My old family was about obligation. It was conditional. I was loved as long as I was useful, as long as I was fixing, paying, or staying quiet. This was different. This was intentional. Leo didn't stay because he had to, he stayed because he chose to. Evan didn't love me because I filled a function. He loved me because he saw me. This wasn't about blood, it was about respect. It was about showing up and choosing every day to be there. This is the anatomy of a found family. It's not a replacement for the old one, it's the real thing. We ate and we laughed, and for the first time I felt completely whole. Not fixed, not repaired, just a whole. The next day, I took a small portion of the money and I walked to a pawn shop I'd passed 100 times. I bought a $75 secondhand digital camera. It was old, a little scuffed up, but the lens was clear. I walked out into the sunlight and started my own business. Not the one that fixed others, but the one that built mine. If you have ever felt like the fixer in your family, this story is for you. Share it with someone who needs to hear that they have the right to leave.